Hi, my name's Stuart Lynch, and in this video, I'd like to introduce you to a host of new features for TabView introduced this year at WWDC 24. Now, most of the features apply to iPadOS with a new SideBar TabView, but there are some things that you need to know for iOS as well. So buckle up, there's a lot to cover, but I think that if you stick with me, you'll learn some new things. I tried to be thorough in this video so you can get all of the information that you need. I love getting your feedback, so if you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up and leave me a comment below. Make sure you ring the bell to enable notifications and get notified whenever a new video is released. And if you want to support my work, you can buy me a coffee. A link is in the description. There is a starter project for this video, and you can download it from the link in the description. There are two branches, so make sure you download the starter project branch for this project, as it has the starter resources. The completed branch contains the completed source code for the video. Just make sure you download and expand the zipped archive. The project does require Xcode 16. At the time of this recording, I'm running Xcode 16 Beta 5. Xcode 16 and the latest OS updates this year are bringing significant changes to TabView. The most significant are for iPadOS, but there are changes for iOS that you should be aware of as well. So we're going to start with iOS and then move on to some exciting new visual changes and opportunities that iPadOS offer. The starter project has some included resources, so if you're going to work along with me, and I suggest that you do, please download the starter project now. In the end, you'll have an example project to refer to showing you how to implement all of the new features that have been discovered this year. I'll go over the included code and assets as we get to them, but to start, I'm just going to use this generic view, which is a renamed content view, to introduce the changes that affect iOS. I have an iPhone 15 Pro selected for my preview, and let's begin by replacing the body of our view with a tab view. Nothing new here yet. To create tabs, however, we no longer need to create a tab item. New in iOS 18, TabView has a new syntax in SwiftUI to make it easier to catch common errors at build time. You now declare a tab struct with a title, an image, and its content view. The simplest and most effective way to create a tab view, if there's an SF symbol that meets your needs, is to use one. So let's create a tab for the home using the system image house. And then for each of our tab view content, however, I'm just going to display a text view. So how about one now just showing home view? Let's create a second one now for family, and we can use the system image figure.and.child.holding-hands. And again, we'll just use a text view for the content. Now, if there isn't an SF symbol that meets your needs, you can upload your own assets. So as you see here in our assets folder, I have a Google Material Design SVG image here called Security. And I've made sure that I've selected this and chosen the rendering to template. So again, I'm going to use an initializer that specifies this time an image in our assets folder. And then again, I'm going to just use a text view for the content. Now, search is a common feature used in many apps, and it's immediately recognizable by its magnifying glass symbol. There is a new role enum now for tab views. Currently, there's only a single case, and that's the search case. So we can use the search role for a tab. And the system will configure a tab with a default title and image, and as you will see later on an iPad, it's pinned placement. With the pin placement, that tab is always going to be available on the trailing edge of the tab bar on an iPad. Of course, in the body, you must present your search content. Let's just add a couple more tabs now. How about one for news? And we'll use the newspaper symbol. And now one for notifications, and we're going to use the system image, which is the SF symbol of a bell. Notice now in the preview that we're beyond the 5-tab limit on an iPhone device. And so you're now presented with the More tab to access those last 2 tabs that we created. Well, now that we've created our tabs, we might want to enable programmable navigation between those tabs. In order to do this, we'll need a tab selection property that is of some hashable type. So for this, I'm just going to create an enum called tabs, and we'll create a case for each one of our tabs like this. So one for home, one for family, passwords, search, news, and notifications. Now we can create that state property in our view called selection that is of type tabs, and we'll initialize it with one of our cases. So let's start at the beginning with the home case. Next then, in TabView, in the initializer, we'll bind the TabView to that selection. Now, instead of adding tags, as we used to with a tab, we have to provide a value for each one of our tabs that is one of those cases. So for example, for home, the value is our home case. Similar for family, the case is family. And we can do the same for the other cases. We'll get to the search case last. In the search tab, which has a role, the value is presented prior to the role in the initializer. And that value will be bound to our search case for our enum, and the role will be the role's enum case. Well, now that we have that, we can do programmable navigation. So on our home screen, I'm going to embed the text view in a VStack. And then as the second item in the view, I'm going to add a button. And I'll use the label Go Notifications. And for the action, I'll simply assign the case notifications to our selection. And let's do the reverse. I'm going to go to the Notifications tab, and I'm going to embed that text view in a VStack. And then I'll add a button using the string Go Home. And for the action, I'll set the selection to the home case. Now from our home view, we can jump to the Notification tab. And from the Notifications tab, we can jump back to home. Now for the remainder of this video, we're going to switch to iPad. And I can show you a lot of really nice new features, so let's do that now. I'm going to switch to the iPad 11 Pro on the preview. Well, you see now that our tabs are no longer at the bottom, but rather at the top of the view. And in portrait mode, you see that the search role button is indeed pinned to the right, with a more arrow to get access to the remaining tabs. If I switch to landscape now, we can see we get all the tabs, but that search tab is always pinned to the right. And our programmable navigation just works. Now I'm recording this video in sections, so I'm going to commit this now to my repository and push it up to my completed branch. In the future, you won't see me do this. New in iPadOS this year is the introduction of a sidebar, and this could be enabled by setting your tab bar style to the new TabView style, which is the case sidebar adaptable. As we are in landscape mode here, you see that it is shown by default. It lists all of your tabs in the sidebar, and they replicate those along the top of the view. But notice that the pin to search is in the same order as you created and not pinned at the bottom. Well, you can dismiss the sidebar by tapping the button at the top left. If we rotate to portrait, you see that the sidebar converts to now an overlay screen. Let's switch back to the landscape so that our sidebar is visible by default. Our search tab bar has a role that is search, so it's automatically pinned. We can also choose to pin whatever of the other tabs we want by adding a tab bar placement modifier to that tab. And we can then specify the pinned case. So I'm going to do that for our notifications tab. Notice that it does nothing to the sidebar, but if we dismiss this and display the other tab bar, we'll see that the icon for the notifications tab is now pinned after the search pin. You may also not want to display a tab in the main view, but only on the sidebar. What we can do then is choose another tab bar placement with a case of sidebar only. So I'm going to do that for the passwords tab. You'll see that it disappears from the tab view now, but if you select it from the tab bar, it does come back and it'll stay there until you relaunch the app. You can also add a header to the sidebar by adding a TabView sidebar header modifier to the tab view. For the content, since it's a view builder, you can add whatever you want. So I'm going to create a label with the title, My Stuff, and I'm going to choose a system image of a star. I'll apply a title font. I'll set it to bold. I'll give it a foreground style of green. And I want this on the leading edge, so I'm going to set a frame specifying the max width of infinity, but the alignment of leading. So if you have a header, you could also have a footer. And it's created exactly the same way, but we'll use a TabView sidebar footer. And for the content, I'm just going to create a simple text view. In addition to headers and footers, you can also create a bottom bar. And the content of the bottom bar is actually pinned at the bottom of the sidebar. So it's always visible when the sidebar is visible, and it doesn't scroll with the content. So for example, let's create a TabView sidebar bottom bar. And then for the content, I'm going to create a button. And this button is going to indicate a mail to. So I'm just going to leave the action, but I'm going to create the label as an image. And for that image, I'll use a system name of envelope.fill. But I'll apply some padding around that image and apply a foreground color of white. But then I'm going to set the background to a circle and apply a fill of a blue color. And then let's add some padding around that entire button and then fix it using a frame with a max width of infinity to the trailing edge, so an alignment of trailing. The next thing that was added was the ability to allow your users to decide the order and where they want to place the tabs in the tab bar. And this is by way of a TabView customization property that can be assigned to each tab. So in order to do this, each tab must have a unique customization ID string value assigned to it. So to facilitate this, I'm going to change that enum to be a string type so that we'll get a raw value. And then I'm going to create a computed property of type string. And I could just return the raw value, but instead I'm going to return my bundle ID, which is com.createexcel.myapp, for example, and then use string interpolation to add the raw value. This tends to be the way that Apple does it. And then in our view, if we want this value to persist between launches, we can create an app storage property to store the changes to the TabView customization type, which can be managed by the key provided by the app storage plist. So we're going to call this key tab customization, and we'll call the variable customization that will be of type TabView customization. So to the TabView itself, then we must enable this use by applying a TabView customization modifier and use the binding to the customization property. Then to each of our tabs, we'll specify a customization ID using the tab's values customization ID computed property. So for example, for our home tab, the customization ID will be our tabs.home.customization ID. Repeat this quickly for all of our tabs. Well, notice now that the sidebar here has an edit button. And when you tap on it, there's a checkbox beside each of the tabs. So you can select or unselect each one, and it will either add or remove it from the main tab view. Of course, passwords is not shown in the main view because we've made that a sidebar only tab view anyway. Notice also in the tab view that the search and notifications are gray and not movable as they are pinned. But you can arrange those other tabs simply by dragging and dropping. However, the preview does not work well for this. So let's make sure that we can run this simulator on an iPad. And then launch it in the simulator and make sure that you are in landscape mode, showing that persisted sidebar. Tap on the edit button, and now you can alter the placement of those unpinned tabs. You can even remove one by dragging it off the tab bar. Notice how the sidebar, the check mark, is still there? I find this strange, and perhaps this is a bug, but we can drag from the sidebar back to the tab bar. You can't rearrange the views in the sidebar, however, but more to that in just a minute. If you want to prevent one of those tabs from being moved, you can set the customization behavior for that sidebar item by simply specifying that it is disabled for the tab bar. Let's do that for the home view. Let's run this one more time in the simulator. And you can see that our tab bar has been rearranged with news preceding family now. And when I go to edit, the home tab in the tab view is no longer movable. Another thing you can do with the sidebar is to add sections to your tab. And when you do this, by default, only the section name will be displayed in the tab bar at the top, and the first view in the tab selection will be the one that's displayed when you're on that section. So let's see how to implement that. In your sidebar, below the last view, create a new tab section. And you'll see that we have a couple of options to pick from, where we could have a header, but I'm just going to display a string title with the string vacations. Within the section, I want to display two tab views for our vacations, one for planned and one for taken vacations. But before I do that, I'll have to assign a value to each tab. And I want that section and each tab to be customizable. So this means we'll need to add 3 more cases to our enum, one for the section, one for each of the 2 tabs. Now I can use the case for the value and computed customization ID for the customization ID. So for the plan tab, the system image can be an airplane, but for the value, for the first item in a tab section, I'll also have to specify the tab type to be able to specify the plan case. Let's just also use a text view for the content. The customization ID will be the tab's plan customization ID. For the taken tab, I'll use a checklist for the system image, but for the value, I'll just specify the case of taken. Again, a text view. And then for the customization ID, it's the tabs.taken.customization ID. Now you'll also have to apply a customization ID to the section itself, and that's why we have that vacations case. Let me run this in the simulator. We can see that the section is in the sidebar, but when we display that tab bar, we see that it's the section title only that is displayed as the tab. And we're taken to that first tab. In order to get to taken, I'll need to return to the sidebar. If I tap the edit button on the sidebar, I can rearrange the order this time within that section list. And if I wanted to, I could even drag and drop from the sidebar to add one of these directly to the tab bar. You can also attach a section actions modifier to the section. So within here, you can create a button, and I'm going to use the label Reset Tabs, but I'm going to use a system image. And this will be the arrow.trianglehead.counterclockwise.rotate.90. And then in the action, we can apply the customization variables reset section order. Now, in order to fix this action button in place, I'll also have to specify a customization ID. So I'm going to return to our enum and just create one more case for that enum that I'll call actions. And now I can apply the customization ID to that action. So let's run the app, and I can see now I have that button. I also forgot to mention that in the sidebar, you can collapse a selection and uncollapse it. So now when I go to edit, I can rearrange the tabs by this sidebar section. And then even if I'm out of edit mode, I can tap that button to reset the original order. Now before I leave this section, I want to show you a bug I discovered. Before quitting the app, exit to the home screen. And you may find, as I did, that the app crashes. It certainly does for Xcode 16 Beta 5. I spent an entire day trying to find out why, and after a lot of sleuthing, I found a fix. In your app setting in the Deployment Info Status Bar Style section, you can enable Requires Full Screen. Now when you run the app and return to the home screen, there's no more crashing. The last thing I want to show you for completeness sake is drag and drop. Now I have never covered a video on drag and drop yet, so I'm going to have to give you a lot of information here without explanation, but I do want to show you it working in tab views. If you're interested, Sean Allen has a great video on this topic, and I'm going to leave a link in the description, so I recommend that you watch that video as well. In the starter project, I have a folder called To-Dos that has a model for books. Each book has a title and an author, along with a category enum that is either wishlist, reading, or completed. And the enum case also has a color associated with it. I have a static array of books that I can use in my project. So what I wanted to do is to use a book list view to display 4 tabs in a section, one for all of my books, one for the wish list, one for reading, and one for completed, and I want to be able to drag and drop books between views via the sidebar. So in order to use this book list view, I'm going to have to pass in a filtered list of books in the last 3 cases. So to do this, I created a store class that is observable, and it has an array of books, but it also has 3 computed properties, one for each of the 3 cases. So I can pass in one of these 3 cases to those 3 filtered views and the entire into the all books view. So when this class is enabled, I'll set the full list of books to my static array. So I return to where the app launches, where app main is. I'm going to have to create a state property for this class that I'll call store, and it'll just be initialized as a store. And then I'll inject it into the environment. So now that it's in the environment, I can use it in our Start tab view, so long as I create an environment variable for store.self, and I'll assign it the variable store. And then I make sure that the preview doesn't crash by also injecting a store instance into the environment for the preview. So now I need to create 5 new cases, one for the section, which is books, one for the view that's going to display all books, one for my wish list, one for my reading list, and one for my completed list. So now I can create a new tab section, and then I'll assign the customization ID of the tab.books.customization ID. So now I have to create 4 tab views here, one for each of the 4 cases instead of using a text view, providing a book list and providing a title for the view. So we'll start with the tab for all books, and I'll use a system image of books.vertical, and its value will be assigned the tab's all books case. The content then will be the book list view, passing in for books our stores books, which is all of the books, and our title will be reading list. And then for our customization ID, it will be the tab's all books customization ID. Now, in the interest of time, let me just quickly zoom through the remaining 3. In each case, all I've done is use a different title, a system image, and a value. I've passed in the corresponding array from the books and a specified title, and applied the correct customization ID. And I can see that I have the new reorderable section with those 4 tabs, each displaying a list of books. Now here is where the magic begins, and where Sean's video will definitely help you out. To support drag and drop, your book object type needs to conform to the transferable protocol. And that's what I enable with this extension here. The first thing I need to do is create a uniform type identifier. And you do that in your info.plist. And it requires my creating an exported type identifier. And notice my identifier ID here. And then in the remaining content for the book plus transferable, this extension, I can make sure that this content conforms to the transferable protocol as Sean describes. So now though, in the book list view, all we have to do to make sure that our HStack with this content becomes draggable in the for each loop is to assign a draggable modifier where the payload is an object of type book, which is what our for each loop is iterating through. And then back in our Start tab view, we'll need to make sure that each one of our sidebar items, except for the original all books, can receive one of the dragged books and respond accordingly. So the only 3 cases will be the wish list, the reading, and the completed tabs. So let's start with the wish list tab. I'm going to add a modifier called drop destination for the payload type, which is book.self. And that's going to generate an array of books. So then we can iterate through books using a for each loop to get a book, in which case we can then determine the index using an if let by comparing the store.books first index, where the iterated id.0.id is equal to the book.id. And then once we have that index, we can go back to the store.books at that index and set the category to wish list. So any book that we drag onto this sidebar is going to have its category set to wish list. So then we can copy and paste and attach this same modifier to each of the other two cases. And all we have to do is change the category to reading and completed. So let me run this in the simulator then once more. You can see that the all books list now is listing all of my books, and that the first book is To Kill a Mockingbird, and it's on my wish list. So I'm going to long press, which is going to allow me to enable dragging, and I'm going to drag it from the list and drop it onto the sidebar, onto the reading tab. And when I let go, I see the list gets updated, and now my reading category has been assigned to that book. We can see it's turned. And if I go to the reading tab, I can see that that book is now there. And once I've read it, I can drag from there onto my completed tab. And when I do that, it disappears from this tab. And if I go to my completed tab, I see that it's there. And if I return back to the All Books tab, we'll see that that book is now being marked as being completed. Perfect. Well, that's it for this video, and thanks for sticking with me through till the end. It's a long video, but I hope you've learned something that you can use in your projects going forward. If you have enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up and leave me a comment below. And be sure to subscribe to my channel to enable notifications so that you're made aware of new videos that I release, typically at least once a week. But you can also download my free channel listening app to be able to search for and find content from any one of my over 300 Swift and SwiftUI related videos. Thanks for watching.